I have the privilege of chairing the Arts and Theology Committee here at AST this year, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker this afternoon, Deborah Sokolove, who's also a friend and former colleague of mine. Deborah is the director of the Henry Luce III Center for the Arts and Religion at Wesley Theological Seminary, where she also teaches courses in art and worship. She received her BA in art education and Master of Fine Arts degree in computer animation from California State University at Los Angeles. She has a Master of Theological Studies degree from Wesley Theological Seminary and the PhD in Liturgical Studies from Drew University. Before coming to Wesley as artist-in-residence in 1994, she taught art, design, and computer imaging at the university level. And in recent years, she's been a regular contributor to ARTS, A-R-T-S, all caps, the Journal of the Society for Religious and Theological Studies, Lectionary Homiletics, Call to Worship, and other journals, as well as several books on religion and the arts. She also maintains an active studio practice as a painter, and her work is represented in numerous collections. And I asked her if she brought some of her artwork with her, and she said she couldn't very well carry it on the airplane. So I'm going to suggest that you go to her website. She'll tell you about that in a little bit, so that you do have the pleasure of seeing her wonderful work. Deborah is multilingual. She speaks academies, the languages of the arts, and nonverbal communications of mystery, which we learned about earlier. How about that? And many other languages as well, probably. Yeah. She's an active member of Church of the Savior, which is a unique congregation, long history, in Washington, D.C., known for its radical living out of the priesthood of all believers and for its commitment to social justice, and now for its commitment to the communal and transformation of the community through the arts. So I give you Deborah Sokolove.
Are we on now? Okay. Now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yes, I was struck by something very familiar about Regina, and we've been kind of noticing what we have in common. But one of the things that is familiar to me about Regina is that she reminds me in some ways of my predecessor as the director of the Center for the Arts and Religion, Catherine Kapikian, who was the founder of the arts program at Wesley Theological Seminary. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to begin by showing you a page out of our lovely new brochure that looks professionally designed because one of our student workers is a professional designer by trade, and so her job last year was to design this wonderful brochure, and I did bring a few copies. Alas, not enough for everybody to have one. But this particular page just sort of talks a little bit about the many things that we do at the center. Not dissimilarly to AST, the arts program at Wesley Seminary began as an artist who had been a student saying, but you can't have theological education without the arts. What on earth do you think, how does that work? The word she used was truncated. So it was a truncated education. So Kathy, who you can see sitting here, was the first artist in residence. After she graduated, she went to the president and the dean and convinced them to give her a studio space. It was in the basement under the chapel, no windows or windows like those. So it was a very dark, dismal place that nobody ever went to. And Kathy, in her indomitable style, not only worked in the studio, she was also allowed to offer a 2-credit course in experiences in the visual arts. And she just sort of on her own started inviting other artists to join her in that space. And that's how our Artist in Residence program began. Simply by Kathy taking the opportunity, okay, I have a studio, I guess some of my artist friends should join me. And eventually that became institutionalized. Eventually, the studio was moved from that dark underground space to a much larger classroom, and as I look at this room, it's probably about this big. It's sort of a double-sized classroom right in the middle of the classroom building. In fact, it's right next door to the bookstore. So it's between the bookstore and the mailroom. So everybody has to pass it on a regular basis. And the studio policy is that the door will be open when artists are working there. And everybody is invited to just drop in and chat. This is not necessarily so good for the artist process, but it's really good for the conversation between artists and theologians, which is our mission, which is to foster dialogue between artists and theologians. We believe strongly that theologians and artists have something important to say to one another. And David and I have something that we are saying to one another out of our different experiences. Not all of the artists that we invite are Christian by profession, but some of them are. And so I'd like to talk to you a little bit about some of the artists, the approximately 100 artists in residence that we've had since 1979, when Kathy first got that studio. I was astonished when I looked at the list. I said, my goodness, it's like there's 96 names, and I'm sure that some of them are not even on here. So that's a long track record. We've had lots of different kinds of artists from different parts of the world, from different artistic persuasions and different faith persuasions, from very Christian to not professing any faith tradition at all, but nonetheless having a deep spiritual hunger that comes out in their work. So the first person I want to talk about is Tom Xenakis, and this piece that you're looking at is called In the Jordan. And what you can almost see, because it seems to be very washed out, if you look carefully, what you would see is what appears to be a classical icon of the baptism of Jesus. But there's something wrong with this icon. It's slashed. It's broken. And things are popping out of it. There's wings and springs and Brillo pads and all kinds of strange things are popping out of it. You can see one of the slashings. Let me see if I can get that little pointer. Over here, that's a slashing, and here's where the wings are kind of, they're feathers. Rather than drawing a little bird to be the Holy Spirit, he just stuck actual feathers in there. And there's some other things that are a little bit even harder to see. Tom is trained as an iconographer. He had a Fulbright fellowship to go to Greece to study with master iconographers twice, 2 different times. He is also trained as a medical illustrator. He studied at Johns Hopkins. They have a special school for medical illustrators. So he carries both of these traditions. And then that wasn't enough. When he came to Wesley, he started to break out, quite literally, of both of those traditions to turn himself into a contemporary artist according to the way that the Academy of Art and Design might appreciate that. And in fact, he went to do an MFA at the Baltimore College of Art and Design, where he studied under Grace Hartigan, who is a well-known abstract artist. Grace Hartigan has died since he studied with her. And Tom had a terrible time there because he is very deeply an Orthodox Christian. He is a member of the Greek Orthodox Church, a member in good standing. He worships there. He is part of that persuasion. He doesn't just do icons because it's a lovely thing. He does icons because that's a deep part of who he is and what he understands. And I understand that his iconographer friends tell him that because of his secular work, he's going to burn in hell because he's not just doing icons. But somehow he manages in himself to be a thoroughly modern Western person who does things that look like this, and a traditional Orthodox iconographer who does things that look like this. He does both. He carries both of those in his being. And to have him at Wesley as a witness to both of those strivings, and he taught how to do icons to our students. He taught a workshop on that during the time he was with us, and he taught me a lot about icons as well. He taught me how to paint in tempera, which is a very exacting medium. But to have him witness to both of those yearnings in one person was an extraordinary experience for our students and our faculty. The works of this that are like this, that are called Chryso, come out of his interest in those ancient icons that he saw in Greece at the monasteries where he studied that were wormhole eaten and kind of broken open by time. The wood is split. And so what is hard to see in a reproduction is that, sorry about that. Let me see if I can get back here. Okay. What is hard to see in a reproduction is all these little, that look like dots, are actually pounded, broken into the wood. He uses a mallet and stamps, and he goes, it is a very physical kind of work. It's not just springing forth from his imagination. It uses his whole body, and it disturbs the neighbors. So there's something theological, not just in the work, in the object, but in the process. There is something about the process that he uses that talks about brokenness and disturbing the neighbors and it not being nice. Now, I will say freely that his work is beautiful. I think it is sensuously gorgeous. But that's not necessarily the only aim of it. I don't avoid the word. I just have problems with the way it's used. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. Another artist in residence who was with us for a time much more recently is Carolyn Gass. Carolyn actually came to us as a student. That relationship goes both ways. Sometimes people come to us as a student and become artists in residence. Sometimes people come to us as artists in resident and become students. I am a prime example of that. I came to Wesley in 1994 as an artist in residence. I'm still there. It's 2001. I got an MTS. I was hired to work as the gallery curator, and then when Catherine Kapikian retired a couple of years ago, they asked me to stay on as director of the center.